last question from Curl Malone, who is a regular question asker and a longtime member of our local community, for which we thank you. Can you please clarify your view of Whitney Webb's work? Are you of the opinion that she is a misguided, honest broker of journalism, or she is malicious and the errors you claim are, quote, unhinged? I've looked closely at everything cited by you and Tracey as errors and found the claims to have as much merit as Mehdi Hassan badgering Taibbi for having misspoke. Do you just not like her as a person? I have followed her for 7 years or so after I heard her on Tim Dillon's old podcast, and I've found her to be genuine in her beliefs. So there have been times I've listened to Whitney Webb. She's clearly a very smart person. She's very well spoken. I think she's very diligent. She doesn't just speak off the cuff. I think she really does a lot of work on the areas that she covers. My problem with Whitney Webb is, and I think this is I think understandable, is you have this experience where you can read or assess media reports and feel like this seems propagandistic. I can identify errors here or deceitful passages, and you're kind of pretty sure that that's the case, but you're not 100% sure. But then there are times when you're in the news and when people are writing about you, and so you have firsthand knowledge of what is actually happening. So if somebody's writing things about you and what you've done and what's being done that is false, you don't have any doubts about the fact that what's being written is false. And there were a lot of articles that she wrote when we first created The Intercept, in our reporting on the Snowden archive, that were just simply fabricated and made up and false, just insanely conspiratorial. I mean, she believed and often asserted that Pierre Omidyar paid us $250 million because he was tied to the deep state and he was trying to privatize the Snowden archive in order to prevent it from being disclosed further. This was so moronic for so many reasons. Pierre Omidyar didn't invest $250 million in The Intercept. He invested that in his big, broad media company, of which The Intercept was a small part. Even when we went to The Intercept, there were only 2 people on the planet who had control of the full archive, myself and Laura Poitras. So nobody could decide what could and couldn't be disclosed. He had no way to try and suppress things from that he and his CIA friends wanted suppressed. I knew this for a fact. He never even attempted to exert the slightest amount of influence in the reporting that we were doing about anything, let alone the Snowden reporting. Never once any attempt by him or anyone associated with him to influence it, let alone pay money to hide documents that were incriminating, as though we would do that to Snowden, as though Snowden would know that that was happening and not object, even though he gave up his life. The whole thing was so idiotic. But the kind of conspiracy theory that if you don't know anything, it seems, like maybe you should believe it. Like, hey, there's this billionaire here and he does have ties to, defense contractors like almost every billionaire does. And why did he invest all this money in a media outlet? Probably because he wants to buy the Snowden archive for himself, have it as his private property, and then prevent it from being disclosed. None of that happened. It just didn't happen. And it didn't matter how often I demonstrated that, how often I said it. You can find so many. So for me, the first encounter that I had with her, and obviously this is going to shape your perception, is not that she just once made a mistake or once wrote an article that was kind of off base. It's that she wrote continuously articles based on assertions of conspiracy theories that I knew firsthand and know to this day firsthand are just made up, like untrue, demonstrably false. And obviously, if you're the subject of those kind of articles by one particular person, again, many over the course of several years, you're going to end up being quite skeptical of the rest of the work that they've done. It doesn't mean that I discount the rest of what she's done. I have nothing against her personally. I don't know her personally. I never really had any personal interactions with her. Maybe once I did, that was initiated by me saying something negative about her work, and it might have been acrimonious. I don't even remember if that's true. I honestly don't have anything personal against her. But it did sour me to the rest of what she's done, even though, as I've said, I've read things that she's written over the years. I've heard her on other shows and interviews. I've often found her, like a diligent analyst, like a very smart and insightful journalist. So it doesn't mean that everything she does is contaminated by these falsehoods that she created, what is it now, 10 years ago, 9 years ago. But obviously it's going to affect how I see her, and it's going to color how I view the things she says and how I assess them. As far as this, I really haven't commented on Whitney Webb. Other than that, I really don't go around like impugning her work. Tracey just wrote a long article because Michael's, at war with everybody who thinks the Epstein case is anything more than one guy who might have done a few bad things with a few underage girls. I don't want to characterize what Michael's view are, but that's how I understand it, and that he thinks this whole broader conspiracy is completely made up and sensationalized and fabulous. And she's one of the people who've been pushing what he considers the more sensationalist part of that story, including his connection to Israeli intelligence, including who was involved in this plot. And so he wrote a long article purporting to debunk what she said. I read the article. I found some of what Michael wrote persuasive. The thing that disappointed me the most was that she kept saying, and her fans kept saying, she'll debate anybody, but Michael kept asking her to debate, and she said no. Maybe she has personal issues. Maybe she doesn't regard Michael as a good faith actor. I don't know. So I don't want to be lumped in with Michael or be treated as some like Whitney Webb hater. I'm not. My only view of Whitney Webb is based on the firsthand knowledge that I had from her. I kind of just moved away from Mint Press and from her writing in the years that followed. And like I said, there are times I've seen her write things on Israel and the U.S. relationship with Israel, the war in Gaza, the Democratic Party, various policies of Trump that I agree with, that I think have been persuasive, that have added positive things to the discourse and conversation. But I don't know that I'll ever be able to, find her to be like one of my favorite sources to turn to based on what I know she did for those 2 or 3 years it was. It just went on and on and on, where she was encouraging people to believe the most sinister things about our integrity, about our journalism, about our ethics, and it wasn't just criticism of opinion, it was assertions of fact that were completely fabricated and made up. And I just gave you one of the examples. There are many others as well. So I really don't have strong feelings about her. I'm willing to listen to interviews she gives when I see them. I sometimes see things that she's written and I'll read them, and I don't read them like with anger or with animosity. So I don't know. The question sort of suggests that I'm on some warpath against Whitney Webb. Absolutely not. I think Michael is. And if you're interested, you should. I don't agree with a lot of what Michael has said. I've been arguing with him in private over Epstein. Not all aspects of what he said. There's parts I agree with, but some parts that I disagree with. I don't really want to have him on to fight about it because we've spent so much time arguing about it already, and I don't want to pour fuel on the fire where he's sort of standing alone. The entire world is calling him a pedophile or whatever. But I do encourage you, if you're interested in that, to go read what he writes. Because like Whitney Webb, like what I just said about Whitney Webb, what Michael writes is very thoughtful. It's contemplative. It's researched. It's reasoned. And instead of just clinging to whatever predetermined beliefs you have about Epstein, if you're interested in reevaluating them or diving into this debate, go read what Michael has been writing. He has multiple articles on Substack. And like I always think, just in general, even if I don't agree with the person doing it, it's always good to have at least one person, even if they're standing alone, saying like, wait, like, let's evaluate this again and see if there's truth here, if this is a mob getting carried away. Even if they're wrong, even if what they're standing opposed to is true, I think it's very healthy to have people willing to do that in our discourse. Not for the sake of being contrarian, because that's just dull and reactionary, but people who genuinely believe that the majority is wrong. I think that's very healthy, and it takes a lot of courage and a willingness to be attacked, to play that role. I think Whitney Webb has done that. I think Michael has done that as well. And so if you're really interested in figuring out who's right and wrong, you should definitely go read what Michael has been writing and what Whitney Webb has been writing as well if you want. But my view of her is very much colored by what I described. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.